Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today, and I've had a lot of questions lately in comments, and I wasn't really planning on talking today, but I can answer about 3 different questions in one video here on this article that I bookmarked a long time ago and I finally found. But I've had questions on the pyramid text, simply what are they? And that, that's not too simple of a question. I'm sure a lot of people, kind of wonder about that when I refer to them. But I'm sure, maybe some people just don't want to ask because I think it's kind of a dumb or silly question or too basic a question, but it's an excellent question. And I'm going to answer that. What are the pyramid texts? And also I've had questions on Egyptologists. What is the big problem there? What is their motive? Whatever. I'll just touch on that briefly. And it has to do with this article a little bit. And also I have had questions on Orion. Do the pyramids at Giza really align with Orion? And some doubt about that. And you just have to look at the whole picture and not just a possible alignment of the pyramids. But I wanted to share this article. I thought it was good, and a bunch of different things can be answered here. So this is about a Susan Brine Morrow, and she has written a book on her interpretation, and this is a new interpretation of the pyramid text, and I think it's important because it's a proper interpretation, or more of a proper interpretation than we have been getting. And I'm just going to read. It says, for years, scholars thought the pyramid texts were merely a series of funeral prayers and magic spells intended to protect Egyptian royalty in the afterlife. But renowned classicist and linguist Susan Brine Morrow has a different interpretation of this sacred literature. She said she believes it's a proof of a complex religious philosophy, one that was less about mythology and more about the life-giving forces of nature. She also believes this ancient Egyptian philosophy influenced many of the spiritual traditions that came after it. The pyramid texts are the oldest religious writings that modern scholars have from ancient Egypt, and quite possibly the oldest sacred text in the world. And here is what's called the Pyramid of Unas, and this pharaoh wanted to preserve an ancient writing that came from, a period much, much earlier than he lived. And these writings, whatever they were on, papyrus or whatever, were in probably real bad shape, and he wanted to preserve these for a long time, so he inscribed them on his tomb wall, or what became his tomb wall eventually. And here are the pyramid texts. And, these are very, very old because when they were inscribed, if we just look at it from when they were inscribed, they're very, very old, but they came from earlier writings. That's important to mention. It says, Morrow explains her research and presents a new translation of the full text in her latest book, The Dawning Moon of the Mind, Unlocking the Pyramid Text. And when she said the Egyptians were relating it to nature, what they saw, she's exactly right. The Egyptians saw no difference between God and nature. And I will leave some links below if I can remember. I'm kind of in a hurry, and I'm just doing this the first time I look at this, really, and I'm just kind of babbling off the top of my head here. This is not something I put some thought into, but since I make a lot of videos, this kind of comes easy for me now. So that's why I put out a lot of videos, because it's not that big of a project for me. But these are not magic spells at all, Morrow told the Huffington Post about the pyramid text. These are poetic verses constructed just like poetry today, sophisticated and filled with word play and puns. Instead of looking at the pyramid text as something written by a primitive and superstitious people, as she claims many Egyptologists before her have done, Morrow puts the text in the context of Egypt's vibrant literary tradition and its cultural connections to nature. And these pyramid texts are written on the main chambers in this place, and I'll try to leave some links below what the entrance to this place looks like. But she said what she saw in the ancient lines inscribed on the inner walls of the Pyramid of Unas was a densely compounded but highly precise map of the stars. The Egyptians studied the stars to determine what time of the year the Nile would flood and make their land fertile again. In this earliest form of Egyptian philosophy, Morrow said she believes it's not a goddess or a spiritual personality that the Egyptians worshipped, but the sky itself. It was nature itself that was sacred, and that held the promise of eternal life. She offers a new translation of the opening verse of the text in her book, which she believes described the soul rising up into the fire or the dawn sky beneath the holy ones or the stars. And this is her translation. The sword of Orion opens the doors of the sky. Before the doors close again, the gate to the path, over the fire beneath the holy ones as they grow dark. As a falcon flies, may Unis rise into this fire. And of course, the sword of Orion is where the Orion Nebula is located. The Mayans refer to this in their creation myth. So I don't think that is a coincidence, and visit Danny Wilten's page if you want to learn more about Orion and the spiritual meaning of Orion. But it says, I realized I was looking at a very vivid poetic description of the actual world, Morrow said. But James P. Allen, an Egyptologist at Brown University who produced a 2005 translation of the text, isn't convinced. He likened her translation to the work of amateurs and called it a serious misrepresentation of the pyramid text. Oh, really, Mr. Allen, is it a serious misrepresentation done by amateurs? Well, it just so happened that the ancient Egyptians looked to the sky and the stars, and that told them a story, and they told it through allegorical myths, or whatever you want to describe as their way of transmitting the story of the sky to the story of the earthly realm and people. You know, and the fact that Egyptologists don't look at archaeoastronomy and the stars to tell their story of what the ancient Egyptians were trying to tell us, now that is truly the work of amateurs and a serious misrepresentation of what the ancient Egyptians were trying to send down into the future and their stories and their myths. So, Mr. James Allen, that's pretty sad. It says, he goes on to say, it is a translator's job to be as faithful to the original as possible. Yet Egyptologists don't look to archaeoastronomy or the stars. Are you kidding me? That is what he says. It is a translator's job to be as faithful to the original as possible while using words as constructions that make sense to the modern readers. Ms. Morrow has not done that, Allen told the Huffington Post. Her translation is basically a poet's impression of what she thinks the text should say and not a reflection of what they actually say. And, for her part, Morrow was convinced that the hieroglyphs aren't something that is only accessible to professionals. You are exactly right, Miss Morrow. Her purpose in bringing this new translation to light was to encourage others to look at the text and see what they find. Whenever people think hieroglyphs, they see them as something that has to be deciphered, something archaic and ancient. But hieroglyphs are an absolutely vivid reading of nature that is very accessible to anybody today. Perfectly said. I think this is an excellent article. It offers a little light on Orion, and coming from very ancient writings from ancient Egypt, they referred to this place and the sword of Orion as a place that the soul ascends to in the afterlife. Now, when you look at the pyramids in the Giza Plateau, and people say, well, they are in the form of Orion, you can look at a lot of things and they can be in the form of a lot of things. But when you have text describing the ascension of the soul to Orion, and you have it on the Giza Plateau, and if you know the real history of the Giza Plateau, those monuments tell a specific story. And I'm going to be making a video, and not my theory, I'm going to be telling the story of the Giza Plateau and those structures through the words and philosophy of the ancient Egyptians, not my own, and I'm going to connect it at every level. So look for that video in the upcoming weeks, and you all have a very nice day.